"Ma'am, please save my dad." A billionaire's son begged a black nurse, and then a billionaire collapsed in the rain, and a poor black nurse risked everything to save him. But moments later, police arrested the woman who gave him back his life. "Ma'am, please, please save my dad. He's not breathing." That cry didn't sound like a child's voice. It sounded like a wound. It sliced through the rain and straight into Maya Williams's chest. She stopped walking, her diner uniform clinging to her skin, her shoes half submerged in water. The streetlight flickered overhead, painting everything in gold and grey, the kind of color you only see when heaven is watching and not helping. A small boy stood in the middle of the street. No umbrella, no coat. Rain streaming down his face like tears that wouldn't stop. His hands shook as he pointed toward a silver Bentley. Inside, a man sat slumped against the wheel, motionless. Maya's first instinct wasn't compassion. It was fear. Fear of that car. Fear of that skin color. Fear of every headline she'd ever read. Her throat tightened. Not again. She had sworn never to touch another patient after the board stripped her license. Not after they called her violent for saving a black woman whose screams disrupted the ward. Not after the hospital security dragged her out while her white supervisor smiled. She whispered under her breath, "Keep walking. You can't save anyone anymore." But then the boy fell to his knees in the puddles, clutching at her apron, sobbing so hard it broke something in her chest. His voice cracked. "Please, ma'am." They said, "You people help everyone." You people. 2 words she'd heard her whole life, this time from a child too innocent to mean harm. And somehow, that made it worse. Maya's body moved before her mind could stop it. She ran toward the car. The smell of wet leather and cologne hit her as she pulled the door open. The man's face was grey, lips blue. His expensive watch ticked against a pulse that no longer existed. Her hands hovered. Her reflection stared back at her in the window, a black woman in a grease-stained uniform. Rain dripping off her chin. If she touched him, it could be suicide. One wrong witness, one camera angle, and she'd be on the news again. But if she didn't, a little boy would watch his father die. Her voice shook. "God, not this again." She pressed her palms to his chest. 1, 2, 3. Her rhythm was steady, but her mind screamed. Every push felt like pressing against the world that had already buried her once. Rain pounded harder. She could barely see through the water in her eyes. The boy cried outside, pounding on the window. "Please, ma'am, please." Maya tilted the man's head back, gave 2 breaths, and whispered, "Come back. Don't make me lose this one too." Her arms burned. Her knees ached. The street was empty, except for the sound of rain and desperation. Then, suddenly, a gasp, a cough. The man's chest lifted weakly. Maya froze. Relief and disbelief tangled in her throat. He's breathing. The boy yanked the door open, crying harder, clinging to his father's arm. She wanted to smile. She wanted to collapse. But headlights cut through the storm. A black Mercedes slid to a stop. A woman stepped out, umbrella snapping open like a blade. Her voice sliced through the chaos. "Get away from him. What are you doing to my son?" Maya turned just in time to see the woman's face pale, furious, eyes wide with something she'd seen before. Disgust, fear, authority. The boy shouted, "Mommy." She saved him, but the woman didn't hear, or maybe she didn't want to. She ran forward, grabbed Maya's shoulder, and screamed again. Maya staggered back, her palms still shaking. The man she just saved coughed weakly. The boys sobbed between them, but no one saw that. They only saw her the wrong color, the wrong place, the wrong savior. And in that frozen second, Maya knew. She had just traded her life for a heartbeat that didn't belong to her. If you're watching this, don't look away, because sometimes the people punished most for kindness are the ones who still choose to help anyway. Stay till the end, and if this story breaks you a little, let it. That's how you know your heart still works. Subscribe to Emotional Echoes, because somewhere tonight, another Maya is standing in the rain, still deciding whether to help. The sound of that woman's scream hit harder than the thunder. For a split second, Maya thought it was another plea for help. But when she turned, she saw the umbrella first, black silk snapping open against the storm, and behind it, a woman running with a kind of terror that made reason impossible. Helen Carter didn't see CPR. She saw her son's chest jerking beneath the hands of a stranger. To her panicked eyes, it looked like violence. To a mother who had already buried too many fears under diamonds and control, it looked like the nightmare she'd never prepared for. She ran forward, heels slipping on the wet pavement, shouting words she didn't even recognize as her own. "Get away from him! What are you doing to my son?" Rain blurred everything the car. The faces. The truth. Maya froze, her hands still on Elliot Carter's chest, feeling his fragile pulse returning under her fingers. She tried to speak through the chaos. He wasn't breathing. I was helping him. But the words were torn apart by the storm. Helen only saw her son gasping, his head jerking back, and the woman above him pressing harder, harder, as if she were trying to take his breath instead of give it back. The boy cried out, his voice cracking, "Mommy." She saved him, but Helen's fear had turned into blind protection, the kind that erases logic. She grabbed Maya's shoulder and yanked her away, her nails scraping against the soaked fabric of Maya's uniform. "Don't touch him. Don't you dare touch him." Maya stumbled back, her knees hitting the slick asphalt. She looked up at Helen, the trembling hands, the shaking umbrella, the tears mixing with rain. It wasn't hatred. It was panic so deep it had forgotten how to trust. For one brief second, Maya understood that, and still, it broke her. Sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights painted over everything: the silver car, the black umbrella, the woman kneeling in the street. The officers stepped out before anyone could explain. One shouted above the rain, "Step away from the vehicle." "Ma'am." Maya tried to comply, lifting her hands slowly. But the moment one of them saw her face, saw the color of her skin, something in the air shifted. A hesitation, a flicker of judgment that froze the world. Then one officer moved forward, hand on her arm. "Ma'am, we'll take it from here." She tried again, pleading, "Please." He had no pulse. "I'm a nurse." But the grip on her arm tightened. Elliot Jr. screamed, trying to push past his mother. "She's saving him. Please don't take her." His small hands reached for Maya as the officers turned her around. The cuffs clicked shut, cold against her wrists. The sound was louder than the thunder. Helen knelt beside her husband now, whispering his name, half crying, half praying. For the first time, she looked at Maya, and in her eyes, there was confusion, not cruelty. A woman trying to understand what she had just done, but she didn't speak. Pride and guilt kept her silent. Maya's breath came in shallow gasps. The boy kept crying her name, his voice fading under the storm. "Miss Maya, don't let them take you." She looked at him, her face streaked with rain and exhaustion. "It's okay. Honey, your daddy's safe now." The officers pulled her toward the patrol car. Her shoes slipped against the pavement. She could still hear the boy's sobs, the mother's trembling prayers, and the thunder rolling over all of it, loud, merciless, final. Through the blur of the rain-streaked window, Maya saw her reflection, wet hair, bruised wrists, calm eyes. She didn't look like a criminal or a hero. She looked like someone who had finally understood what it meant to save a life and lose everything for it. The rain didn't stop when they dragged her in. It followed her, dripping from her hair, sliding down her collar, leaving tiny puddles on the police station floor, as if the storm refused to leave her alone. The metal cuffs were gone, but their shape was still burned into her wrists. The interrogation room was freezing. The flickering fluorescent light hummed like it was bored of hearing people beg. Across the table sat a young officer, no older than 30, his badge shining brighter than his empathy. He flipped through a clipboard and spoke with the kind of practiced politeness that cut deeper than shouting. "So, Miss Williams, you just happened to find a rich man passed out in his car, in a neighborhood you don't live in." She stared at her hands, still shaking from the cold. "I heard a child screaming. I did what anyone would do." The officer chuckled. "Anyone?" He leaned back, arms crossed. "You mean anyone like you?" Another officer by the door snorted, not even pretending to hide it. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't look away. She'd seen this before, that look people gave when they'd already decided who you were. Then the door opened. Detective Holden stepped in, coat still wet, tea lotioned, eyes tired, in a way that only came from seeing too much wrong. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded at the two officers. "I'll take it from here." The younger one frowned. "She's all yours." "Detective." But when he didn't leave, Holden's voice hardened. "I said, I'll take it." When the door shut, the room felt smaller. "But quiete tu." He sat down, placing a small notebook on the table. His voice was low, even. "Start from the beginning. What happened tonight?" For the first time since the sirens, someone sounded like they wanted to listen. She told him everything: the rain, the boy, the car, the pulse that wasn't there. Her words trembled, but her gaze stayed steady. When she finished, Holden leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Did anyone check the dash cam?" Silence. The young officer outside the glass wall looked up from his phone, annoyed. "We don't need a dash cam. We've got enough eyewitnesses." Holden's jaw flexed. "You mean the people who showed up after the fact?" He stood, grabbed the evidence report from the table, and walked out. The sound of his boots echoed down the hallway. From the window, Maya could see him gesturing sharply at the duty sergeant. The sergeant shook his head, arms crossed. Holden's voice rose, not shouting, but with the quiet fury of someone too tired to play politics. Minitus stretched. The rain outside softened, but the tension inside thickened. Through the glass, Maya watched Holden pull out his badge, slam it on the desk, and say something that made the sergeant flinch. Finally, the older man nodded. A younger officer was sent running toward the evidence room. When Holden came back, his sleeves were rolled up, his eyes stormy. He dropped into the chair and pressed play on a small tablet. The footage flickered the boy crying, Maya's hands moving in rhythm, the man's chest rising again. For a long time, no one spoke. Even the hum of the light seemed to fade. The younger officer peeked in through the door, jaw tight. "You happy now?" Holden looked up slowly. "Yeah. Are you?" He turned off the video and faced Maya. "You saved him." The words landed heavy. Simple. Undeniable. She exhaled shakily. Not from relief, from exhaustion. Holden rubbed a hand over his face. "You shouldn't have had to fight for this proof." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "I might take heat for pulling that footage without authorization, but truth's supposed to mean something." "Right." Maya's eyes met his. "Thank you." He nodded once. "Quiet. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." He stood and opened the door. "You're free to go, But take care of yourself. Not everyone out there wants this story told right. She stepped into the hallway, the cold air hitting her face like freedom that didn't know if it wanted to stay. Across the street, under a black umbrella, Helen Carter waited elegant, motionless, eyes full of things she couldn't say. For a moment, their gazes met. Then Helen turned away. Maya pulled her jacket tighter. The rain had stopped, but the city still dripped with suspicion. And as she walked into the night, she realized that some storms don't end, they just move indoors. When she finally stepped into her apartment, the rain came in with her. It clung to her hair, her clothes, the air she breathed. The world outside was still wet and cruel, but inside, everything was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows humiliation. Lorraine Jacobs sat at the kitchen table, folding laundry with the calm rhythm of someone who had seen too many storms. The lamp beside her gave off a soft amber light, touching the edges of the room like a promise of peace. She looked up the moment Maya closed the door. "You look like you wrestled with the devil." Maya let out a bitter laugh. "Feels like he won." She dropped her soaked bag on the floor, sat down without a word, and stared at her hands. The faint marks from the cuffs were still there, red against brown skin. Her voice cracked as she finally spoke. "I saved a man's life, Aunt Lorraine, and they arrested me for it." Lorraine didn't flinch. She just folded another shirt, slow and steady, then looked up with eyes full of quiet fire. "The world's been punishing good women since before you were born. Baby, that's not new." Maya leaned back, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from her hair. "I'm tired of being punished for being decent." Lorraine reached over, touched her hand gently. "Being decent isn't what broke you. It's what kept you human. Don't lose that." Outside, thunder grumbled far away. The old clock on the wall ticked like a heartbeat. Then, faintly, the world began to intrude again. A news report played from the TV, left on in the corner grainy footage of the Bentley. Yellow tape, a trembling voice narrating the controversial arrest of a former nurse. Maya turned toward it slowly. Her face appeared on the screen for a second, hair plastered to her forehead. Handcuffed, head bowed. The caption below read, "Hero or Threat." Her stomach twisted. The newscaster's voice kept talking, shifting from facts to speculation. Some people online praised her courage. Others called her reckless. And beneath every headline, comment sections burned with words that stung worse than rain. She whispered, half to herself, "They made me into a story." Lorraine's voice was steady. "Then make sure they remember the right version." The phone rang, a deep, vibrating tone that cut through the tension. Maya hesitated, staring at it. The screen showed an unknown number. Lorraine gave her a look that said, "Answer it." Maya picked up, her voice cautious. "Hello." The line crackled, then a calm, professional voice spoke. "Miss Williams, this is Dr. Kaminsky from Atlanta Regional Hospital. Mr. Carter would like to see you." Her breath caught. The name fell heavy in the room. The man she had saved, the man whose mother had watched her get dragged away. She didn't answer right away. Lorraine leaned forward. "What did he say?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "He wants to see me." For a moment, the only sound was rain tapping the window like hesitant fingers. She looked at her aunt, ease uncertain, heart split between fear and unfinished duty. "Tell him, I'll come." Outside, lightning flashed again, but softer this time, as if the sky itself was giving her permission to return to the fight she never asked for. The hospital was nothing like the storm. It was too bright, too still, too clean, as if the world had decided to erase what happened under that rain. The steady beep of a monitor replaced the thunder, and sunlight fell across white sheets like forgiveness trying to find its way in. Elliot Carter opened his eyes to that light. For a moment, he didn't know if he was alive or dreaming. His chest hurt, his throat was dry, but he could feel something again, air-filling lungs that had once stopped. He turned his head slowly. The boy sat asleep on a chair beside the bed. His small hand, still holding his father's, Elliot's gaze softened, a fragile smile breaking through. Then he saw her, standing near the doorway, hands folded, still wearing the same black jacket from the night before. Maya Williams. For a second, the air grew heavier. The nurse by the bed whispered something about her being the woman who saved him. Elliot tried to speak, but only a hoarse sound came out. Maya stepped closer, cautious, calm. She looked tired, but her eyes held a strange peace, the kind you only find after surviving something unjust. He managed to form the words, "You saved me." She shook her head gently. "Your son did. I just listened." Her voice was quiet but firm, as if she was protecting a truth no one else could see. The door opened. The soft click of expensive heels broke the silence. Helen Carter entered, wrapped in her usual perfection pearls, pressed blouse, control. But her face wasn't the same. Her eyes were swollen, her mouth uncertain. She froze when she saw Maya. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Helen's fingers trembled as she adjusted her purse strap, a small gesture to fill the silence. Then, with effort, she whispered, "I didn't know. I thought—" She stopped, unable to finish. Her gaze fell to the floor. The sound of the heart monitor filled the gap where pride used to live. Maya's reply came after a long pause. "Fear makes us all blind. I get it." She looked down at the sleeping boy, then back at Helen. "But maybe it's time we start seeing people for what they do, not what they look like." Helen nodded, eyes glistening. It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was something close. For her, that was already a revolution. Elliot watched them both, his hand trembling as he reached for the cup of water beside him. His voice broke the tension, low and rough. "Whatever happened out there, thank you." Maya gave a faint smile, her eyes shining in the sunlight, now slipping through the blinds. "You're welcome. Rest. You've still got a boy who needs you." For the first time, Helen looked at Maya not as a trespasser, but as a human being, as the woman who gave her son another day to breathe. She stepped closer to the window, staring at the light falling across the floor. Maya turned to leave, but Elliot called out weakly, "Miss Williams." She stopped. He met her gaze with the sincerity of a man who had seen both death and truth in the same night. "You didn't just save my life. You reminded me what it's worth." She nodded. Two moved to answer. The light had shifted now, warm and full, cutting across their faces like a bridge between two worlds that had never touched before. When Maya stepped into the hallway, the hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and new beginnings. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight lift not completely, but enough to breathe again. The morning after her visit to the hospital, Maya woke to the sound of quiet knocking. The air still smelled of rain, though the storm had passed. When she opened the door, sunlight poured in for the first time in weeks, and behind it stood a man who had once been half dead in her arms. Elliot Carter looked smaller out of the headlines, less like a billionaire, and more like a man still learning how to breathe again. He stood awkwardly, holding a slim envelope in one hand. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said softly, eyes flicking past her into the narrow apartment that smelled faintly of coffee and survival. Lorraine appeared behind Maya, drying her hands on a towel, her look cautious but not unkind. Elliot cleared his throat. I came to thank you properly, but also to ask you for something." Maya's chest tightened. She crossed her arms, not out of anger, but out of defense. She had seen men like him all her life, powerful, polished, apologetic, when it was safe to be. What could he possibly ask of her now? He took a breath, then extended the envelope. Inside was a letter printed on heavy paper with the emblem of the Atlanta Medical Trust. His voice trembled a little. "It's a scholarship, full tuition. It will let you reapply for your nursing license. You don't owe me anything. I just want to help make right what should never have been taken from you." Maya stared at it. Her pulse uneven. Her first instinct was to refuse. Pride rose like armor. No one had ever given her anything without expecting something back. She wanted to say no. She wanted to stay angry. But then she saw his hand, the same one she had pressed against, to bring life back, shaking slightly as he waited. She realized this wasn't pity. It was gratitude, learning how to speak. Lorraine watched silently, eyes soft. Maya looked down at the envelope again. Inside it, she saw more than a scholarship. She saw a door to the woman she used to be, to the life she thought she'd buried under shame and headlines. Her voice came out low. "Careful." "Why me?" Elliot met her eyes. "Steady. Because you saved me when the world told you not to. And because I believe the world needs more people like you wearing that coat again." Something broke open in her chest. Not pain, but release. She nodded slowly. "All right." Weeks later, Maya stood in front of a mirror inside the small nursing school downtown. The sunlight through the window hit the white coat folded neatly on the table. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The fabric was crisp, new, yet it carried the memory of every patient she'd ever touched, every injustice she'd endured. She slipped her arms through the sleeves. The moment the collar settled around her neck, she felt the weight of her dignity return. Her reflection looked back at her older, scarred, but whole. Lorraine clapped quietly from the doorway, smiling through tears. "You look like yourself again, baby." Maya took a slow breath. "No," she said softly. "I look like who I was always meant to be." The white coat changed everything, but it didn't silence the whispers. It only made them louder. People wanted to know who the woman in the rain was, the one they called the nurse who saved the billionaire. Some said she was brave. Some said she was reckless. Others said nothing at all, but they watched. The call came 2 weeks later. A journalist named Camille Rost wanted to meet her. Maya almost said no. She wasn't interested in fame. She had lived too long in the shadows of other people's opinions to chase the light now. But something inside her, maybe the same voice that made her run toward that car, whispered that silence had cost her enough. The studio lights were too bright. The makeup artist asked if she wanted to cover the faint scar near her temple. Left from the night, she was shoved into the patrol car. She said to leave it. Let them see it. The camera rolled. Camille sat across from her, notebook on her knee. Voice, soft but steady. "Tell me why you did it." "Maya, you had every reason not to d—" Maya looked straight into the lens. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her voice came out low, even almost like a confession. "Because he was dying. And I'm tired of watching people die just because they don't fit someone's picture of who deserves to live." Camille leaned forward. "Were you afraid that night?" Maya smiled faintly. "I was afraid the moment I stopped being a nurse. Afraid the world would teach me to look away. That night, I decided not to be afraid anymore." The interview went on. She spoke about the arrest, the humiliation, the long hours in that cold room. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize. She just told the truth, raw, clean, unshaken, the kind of truth that doesn't need to shout to be heard. When it aired, it was like the whole country took a breath at once. The clip spread across social media within hours. People shared it with captions like, "This is what courage looks like," and she spoke for all of us. Hashtags flooded timelines. Number, Maya saved me. Number, do the right thing. Number, let her heal. For every voice that praised her, there was another that doubted. Some said it was staged. Some said she was lucky. Others turned her pain into politics. But Maya didn't read the comments. She had learned that truth doesn't need everyone to believe it, only enough people to pass it on. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in her mailbox. The handwriting was neat, practiced, almost trembling. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single page. It read, "I saw your interview. I was wrong. I was afraid, but you showed me what grace looks like. Thank you for saving my son and for saving me from myself." It was signed, simply, Helen Carter. Maya sat by the window for a long time, the letter in her lap. Outside, the city moved like nothing had changed. But in her heart, something had. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding, the kind that doesn't erase pain, only teaches it how to breathe differently. Later that night, she stood in front of her mirror, still wearing the white coat. The reflection looking back wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Everyone who'd been punished for doing what was right. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. Her story had left her hands and entered the world carried by strangers who saw in her the proof that goodness, even when beaten down, always finds a way to rise again. The world had finally started listening, and Maya decided to use her voice for something that lasted longer than headlines. The old grocery building on Edgewood Avenue had been abandoned for years, its windows cracked and its floors covered in dust. But when she stepped inside with a paint bucket and a dream, it no longer looked forgotten. It looked like a beginning. She called it The Haven, a small community clinic with 3 donated exam tables, second-hand medical supplies, and a sign out front that said, "Care without judgment." Every morning, people lined up, mothers with crying babies, old veterans who hadn't seen a doctor in years, young workers too scared to take a day off. Maya treated them all. Her laughter began to return, light and unguarded, echoing off the newly painted walls. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The neighborhood brought flowers. Children waved when she walked home. Un stranger smil, saying they'd seen her interview and were proud. It was fragile, but it was hope. On the night it happened, the city was quiet. Rain tapped softly against the clinic windows. Maya locked up late, humming under her breath as she flipped the sign to closed. The street light outside flickered once before she turned the corner. When she returned the next morning, everything was gone. The front door was shattered, the donation box ripped open, and medical files scattered across the floor. The walls, the same ones she'd painted herself, were splashed with red spray paint. The words slashed across them read, "Stay in your place." For a long time, she didn't move. Her hands trembled as she stepped inside. Hair shoes crunching over broken glass. The smell of paint, sharp and toxic, filled her lungs until she thought she might choke. She sank to her knees beside an overturned chair, her breath breaking into short, uneve gasps. Lorraine found her there an hour later. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around her. Maya's voice came out hollow. "They took everything, Auntie." Lorraine squeezed her hand. "Not everything, baby. Not you." By noon, news cameras surrounded the clinic. The story had spread fast, photos of the vandalized walls, the hateful words, the shattered shelves. Reporters shouted questions as Maya stepped outside. wearing her white coat still stained with dust. For a moment, she wanted to hide, to go home, to let someone else speak for her, but then she saw a small boy standing in the crowd holding his mother's hand, looking at her the way Elliot Jr. once had. His eyes were wide, waiting for her to show him what strength looked like. Maya stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, then steadied with every word. They told me to stay in my place. She glanced back at the ruined clinic. This is my place, where people can come without fear, where kindness doesn't need permission. The crowd went silent. Cameras flashed. A single tear rolled down her cheek. But she didn't wipe it away. It wasn't weakness anymore. It was proof she still felt, still cared, still fought. She took a deep breath. You can burn walls. You can break windows. But you can't break what made me build this in the first place. The next day, hundreds of people showed up to help clean. Volunteers painted over the graffiti, leaving one section untouched, the spot where the hateful message had been. Now covered with new words in white paint, "This is our place." Maya stood outside, watching them work, the morning sun rising over the city. For the first time since that night in the rain, she didn't feel like she was standing alone. She was standing exactly where she was meant to be. After the break-in, the city started talking again, but this time, the noise felt different. It wasn't pity. It was power, the kind that frightened people who had always been in control. Maya knew it was only a matter of time before someone tried to silence her again. She just didn't expect it to come in the form of an expensive suit and an old familiar smirk. Nathan Voss showed up one evening. Just as the clinic lights were dimming, he didn't knock. He stood in the doorway like he owned the air she breathed. His voice low, polished, dripping with the confidence of men who had never been told no. "You've made quite a spectacle of yourself, Miss Williams." Maya didn't move from her desk. The faint hum of the air conditioner filled the silence between them. She had seen this type before, the ones who believed kindness was weakness until it ruined their plans. He walked closer, glancing at the framed photo on her wall, the one of her and the volunteers rebuilding the haven. "Symbols are dangerous," he said softly. "They make people think they matter, and that threatens order. You're turning a small act into a movement. And the people I represent don't like movements." Maya looked up at him. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Maybe the problem isn't the movement. Maybe it's the kind of order that needs to be threatened." Nathan laughed. A cold, hollow sound. "You really think you can fight a system built before you were born?" She met his gaze. "No, but I can make sure it sees me." For a second, something in his smile faltered. Then he leaned in, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. "Be careful. People who rise too fast tend to fall harder." Maya rose slowly from her chair. "Then I'll make sure I fall loud enough for the world to wake up." Nathan's eyes narrowed. He turned to leave, muttering something about arrogance. But the shake in his voice betrayed what he wouldn't admit. She scared him, not because she had power, but because she had nothing left to lose. That night, she stayed late at the clinic, sorting files under the soft hum of fluorescent lights. The world outside was quiet again, almost peaceful. But when she left, she felt something shift in the air. The next morning, the back door was pried open, cabinets overturned, computers missing. Detective Holden came personally. He looked around the wreckage, jaw tight. "This isn't random," he said. Maya nodded, exhaustion in her voice. "I know who it was." Holden didn't ask. He already knew, too. The security footage told the rest. Nathan Voss, entering through the back alley, gloves on, flashlight in hand. Within hours, the video hit every major news channel. The man who once sat on charity boards and spoke about moral integrity was caught red-handed, destroying what he couldn't control. Maya didn't smile when she saw the broadcast. She just sat quietly in the clinic's waiting room, watching the world finally catch up to the truth. Holden stopped by that evening, leaning against the doorframe. He grinned. "Looks like you finally brought down the big man." Maya shook her head. "No, he brought himself down. I just kept the lights on long enough for everyone to see it." By nightfall, crowds had gathered outside again, not to protest, but to cheer. The same walls that once screamed, "Stay in your place," were now covered in messages of hope. She stepped outside, the cool wind brushing her face, and for a moment, the city felt new again. She whispered to herself, half prayer, half promise. They can tear down buildings, but not belief. And this time, I'm not falling alone. The cheers from Part 9 did not make the fear vanish. They only gave it a place to stand. By morning, the fear had turned into resolve. And that resolve carried Maya up the marble steps of City Hall. She felt the weight of the white coat on her shoulders, not as a costume, as a promise. Outside, people held hand-painted signs and kept their voices low, like a prayer being passed down a line. Inside the council chamber, cameras waited. Rows of faces watched with a mix of curiosity and defense. Maya stood at the podium and set both hands on the wood so she could feel something solid. She began with the rain. She told them about a cold night, a child pulling at her sleeve, and a heartbeat that stopped listening. She said she did what she was trained to do, not because of who he was, but because he was human. She did not dress the pain. She spoke about the slap, the cuffs, the room that smelled like bleach and doubt. She said the worst bruise did not show up on skin. It grew where a person keeps their faith in other people. Then she told them what came after: a city waking up, a clinic rising from a broken window, a boy who kept drawing capes on a nurse and calling that hope. The room shifted like it had remembered how to breathe. A councilman asked why the law needed to change. He said protocol protects lives. Maya answered that protocol without mercy protects fear. She said the Good Samaritan reform would not erase training. It would honor it when seconds mattered and paperwork came later. She kept her voice steady. She said the law should cover retired nurses, off-duty medics, caregivers who know what a pulse feels like inside their palms. She said the law should shield a helper who acts in good faith when a life is slipping away. Helen sat behind her in a navy coat with her hands folded tight. When Maya paused, Helen stood and spoke like someone learning a new language. She said the city would be safer if it learned to trust the hands it once doubted. Elliot spoke next, with simple words and a fragile throat. He said he lived because a stranger refused to look away. He said the reform was not charity. It was correction. And it was late. The vote did not happen fast. It moved through questions and murmurs and a silence that hurt. Then the lights on the board changed from red to green like a slow sunrise. The room did not erupt. It exhaled. Maya did not raise her fists. She closed her eyes and let the air cool her face. Detective Holden nodded once from the back row, the way people nod at funerals and births, knowing both are sacred. Outside, the crowd lifted a low cheer. No fireworks, no stage. Neighbors stepped closer and touched her sleeve, as if to make sure she was still real. Lorraine pressed a tissue into her hand and told her to save the tears for later. Late that afternoon, Maya walked alone to the intersection where everything began. Third and Hollis had the same cracked curb and the same stubborn light. But a new sign had been bolted to the pole, and it tipped toward the winter sky. Maya Williams Way. The words looked too clean for a place that held so much rain, but that felt right too. Healing never matched the mess it rose from. She stood on the exact spot where she had counted compressions and given a stranger back to his son. She whispered that she would do it again, Even if it broke her life a second time, then she smiled because she knew her life had not broken. It had turned. She thought about what change really is. Not a headline, not a name on a sign. Change is a hand that does not hesitate when a voice says please, and a city that refuses to punish that hand. She faced the street and spoke the truth out loud. Not to anyone, but to everyone. She said that compassion is not weak. She said that justice is not loud. She said that both of them are work. Before she left, she took out her phone and recorded a short voiceover for the people who had been walking with her from a screen. She told them to stay with the story until the end, because some endings are doors. She asked them to share if they still believed in the kind of courage that whispers and still moves the world. She thanked the ones who subscribed to Emotional Echoes and said this is where they keep the small lights burning. She asked them to tell where they were listening from, because distance shrinks when human beings decide to show up. Then she put the phone away and let the evening take the corner back. The wind lifted a napkin along the curb. A bus hissed and turned. Somewhere a child laughed the way children do when they do not know they are thundering. Maya touched the sign once and headed home to work. The law had changed. The city had changed. She had changed most of all, and only because she refused to. If this story reached you, pass it forward. Someone near you is waiting for proof that kindness still wins. Subscribe to Emotional Echoes for more true human stories, and help us keep the echoes alive. Thanks for listening.